Are prolonged fasts worth it? Hey everyone, Timber Master here, and in this video we are going to be doing a 72-hour fast review of the prolonged fast that I did about 3 weeks ago. Now we are going to be reviewing all the details of my fast, why I did this 72-hour fast, some common misconceptions with doing prolonged fasting, and then we're going to be going over some of the pros of my fast, some of the many cons of my fast, and then lastly, if I would recommend doing a prolonged or 72-hour fast. Now for some of the details of my fast. Well, it was 72 hours long. When it came to anything that I consumed, it was just water, black coffee, green tea, apple cider vinegar, and salt. I did no exercise whatsoever besides walking, and I tried to get about 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night. Now, I also did some other types of measurements, and I measured my weight, my circumference measurements for my chest, waist, and hips. I did body fat measurements, and then I was consistently monitoring my blood glucose. So for my weight, I started at 190 pounds and dropped down to 185 and a half pounds. So that was a 4.5 pound difference. With my circumference measurements, I actually lost a ½ inch off my chest, a ½ inch off my waist, and then about 1.25 inches off my hips. And with my body fat measurements, I started at 13.8, dropped down to 13.1, so that was a change in a 0.7. And then lastly, with the blood glucose measurements, I was really consistent throughout. It ranged between the low 70s to the mid 90s. Now, here is the thing though, a lot of you math whizzes out there might already be thinking, well, how much did Tim lose when it came to his lean body mass? Well, the answer for that is about 2.5 pounds. So I did lose 4.5 pounds total, 2 pounds of fat, and about 2.5 pounds of lean body weight. But here we are 3 weeks later, and what do I weigh now? What's my body fat percentage now? So today I weighed myself and I weigh 188 pounds, and then I also checked my body fat, and that was 12.3%. Now that means a couple of things. Well, I have increased my lean body mass by about 3.5 pounds since the end of my fast, but I've also increased my lean body mass by a little over a pound since the beginning of my fast. And I think I can actually attribute that to a couple of dietary changes that I've made over the past couple of weeks, and then also the fact that I've been getting about an extra 60 minutes of exercise in each week. Okay, so that is some of the data surrounding my 72-hour fast. A lot of people do care about those numbers and those metrics, but why did I decide to do a 72-hour fast? Well, there are actually quite a few reasons as to why I did this fast. In particular, autophagy, which is basically just the general spring cleaning, house cleanup of all of the cells and some of the organelles in your cells in your entire body. We also have increases in stem cell production, which is generally going to be a pretty good thing. Another thing that is actually really important to me is just being able to restore my digestive system. So we currently live in this world today where we're constantly eating, we're constantly snacking, and we never actually give our digestive system a break where it can rest, where it can recover, where it can restore itself. So I think doing prolonged fasts like this are going to be really, really beneficial for overall digestive health. Another thing that I think is really important, often overlooked in general health, is insulin resistance. So when you're fasting, when you're doing prolonged fasts like this, it gives your body a chance to actually become more insulin sensitive, which is always going to be a great thing. And then lastly, before this experience, I had never actually gone more than about 24 hours when it came to fasting. And this is something that I just kind of wanted to see if I could do from a mental perspective, see if I can push myself, see if I can really commit to not consuming food for over a day, for over 2 days, for up to 3 days. And I just wanted to give myself an opportunity to challenge myself and see if I could actually do it. Now, for the several misconceptions that are actually associated with these prolonged fasts. Number one, people think that you're going to be hungry non-stop and that your increased appetite is just going to be increased the whole duration of your fast, and that this is probably something that's going to keep you up at night because you're so ravenous and you're so hungry. And hunger doesn't really work like this at all. What happens is it comes in waves. So it comes and it goes, and it's very, very consistent. And when I say consistent, I mean this. Well, you have this hormone called ghrelin, and ghrelin is essentially just your hunger hormone. So when you see elevated levels of ghrelin, you're going to be hungry. And typically when you eat food, your ghrelin levels start to decrease, and therefore you're not going to be hungry anymore. But what happens to your ghrelin levels when you don't eat food? Well, your ghrelin levels actually behave in a somewhat scheduled fashion, meaning that as you approach mealtime, your ghrelin is going to start to increase, and it's going to drop shortly thereafter, even if you don't eat food. And this is exactly what happened to me. So I'll typically have my first meal of the day around noon, 1 o'clock. Then I'll have my second meal of the day around 5, 6 p.m. And this is when, coincidentally or not so coincidentally, my ghrelin levels started to increase and I got hungry. But after about an hour or two, my ghrelin levels started to decrease and I just wasn't that hungry anymore. And because I'm not usually eating a meal at midnight or 1, 2, 3 in the morning, my ghrelin levels actually never rose while I was asleep. So I never woke up hungry. I was never hungry before going to bed. So for those of you who are worried about waking up in the middle of the night, being hungry, I don't really think that is going to be problematic for anyone who is going to be trying a long duration or prolonged fast. Okay, misconception number 2 is we need to be constantly eating in order to survive. And this is really only partially true. Hey, Future Tim here, quickly interjecting. And what I mean by this is when it comes to survival, we don't need to be constantly eating throughout the day. And even for some of us, we don't even have to be eating on a daily basis. Some of us can actually function at an optimal level, even if we're not eating for days or weeks or even months. So just wanted to clarify that. Okay, take it away, Tim. So if you're overweight or obese, it essentially just means that because of the extra fat that you're holding onto, you have quite a bit of stored energy that your body can run on and survive off of if you do not eat food. So an example of this is Angus Barbieri, who back in 1965 fasted for 382 days. And his starting weight was 450 pounds. And by the time he finished his fast of over 1 year, he weighed 180 pounds. Now that's obviously the extreme case, but because he had so much extra stored energy in his body, he was able to survive without eating any food for over a year. Conversely, if you're pretty lean, if you have a lot of muscle and very, very little fat on your body, you're not going to be able to do this just because you don't have the amount of stored energy that would allow you to not eat food for long periods of time. So you're probably gonna have to be eating on a much, much more continual basis. So yeah, it is kind of true, but for a lot of people, they are really going to be able to go a long way without having to eat food just because of the amount of stored energy that they have in their bodies. Okay, number 3, you'll lose muscle. And this actually does have some validity to it because it technically did happen to me. But here's the thing, when you're fasting, you're actually starting to produce more growth hormone, and this is going to allow your body to start to preserve the muscle that you have. And typically what we find is that people who are leaner are going to be losing a little bit more muscle mass than people who have a little bit more fat mass on their bodies. And this actually kind of relates to what I was just talking about with people not having to constantly eat to survive. Okay, so those were some of the most common misconceptions that do actually have a little bit of validity, but for most people I would say it's not really going to work that way. Okay, so let's transition into some of the pros of my 72-hour fast. Now, first, I think self-experimentation is something that we should all be encouraged to do. It's really easy to just stick to our habits. It's nice, it's comfortable, but if you are looking to make any kind of positive, impactful change with your body, whether it be losing weight or whether it be feeling more energy, getting stronger, building your endurance, doesn't really matter what it is, you're gonna have to do some type of self-experimentation if you wanna see some impactful change. So I think doing the 72-hour fast has really allowed me to push myself in ways that I really haven't ever experienced before. And after having done this, I feel like I'll be better able to break bad habits or challenge myself in other ways that I never thought I could. Now, number 2 is doing the 72-hour fast completely cleared out my digestive system, my GI tract, and it really made my core feel incredible. So there's no food coming in, there's no energy coming in. It's just liquids, it's just water that's entering my GI tract. So that just means a totally cleared out digestive system once you hit that day 3-ish mark. And I often do regular 24-hour fasting, and 24-hour fasts don't compare at all to doing this 72-hour fast. So this was actually one of the nicer experiences of doing this prolonged fast. All in all, I think not eating food for 3 days was really beneficial for my digestive system. I think that I was able to recover and restore and rest it in a way that most people don't really ever get to experience. Number 3 is I didn't experience a robust appetite. I will say this though, my appetite was a little bit stronger up until about that 36-hour mark, but after that, it really tapered off quite a bit. And if it didn't do that, or it lingered for the next day and a half, then that really would have made my experience a lot more challenging and difficult, because a lot of people do actually say that your hunger can persist for about 2 to 3 days. Fortunately, I already eat fairly low carbohydrates in general, but even leading up to the 72-hour fast, I really tried to limit my carbohydrate consumption and start to increase my fat and protein consumption. And I really think that this was helpful in reducing my appetite in a shorter period of time. Another thing that I did prior to the 72-hour fast was a couple of 24-hour fasts and intermittent fasting the week before. And I think when you can couple this fasting and intermittent fasting approach and reducing your carbohydrates and increasing your protein and fat, I think that's what actually helped me see that reduction in my appetite during this entire process. Number 4 was that sleep was actually easier than I thought it would be. The only issues that I did have with sleep were based off of my daughter's sleeping schedule, not the fast. Now, going into this 72-hour fast, this was my absolute biggest fear. For some reason, I just thought that going to sleep on an empty stomach was going to be really challenging. However, it really wasn't that bad at all. I would say that the only difference that I experienced was that on the second night, it took me about a half hour to 40 minutes to fall asleep, when it usually takes me about 5 to 10. Other than that though, I felt like I slept pretty well during the entire process. And number 5 is I didn't really experience any irritability, which was fantastic. Now, I think that this is just because I had pre-framed that I wasn't going to eat for 3 days. And under normal circumstances, when I do my 24-hour fast or even my intermittent fasting, I'm much more irritable on those days. So I think knowing that I just wasn't going to be eating for 3 days really allowed me to stay more calm and less irritable than I actually thought I would have been. Now, before I jump into the cons, if you've had any experience with fasting or prolonged fasting, leave a comment down below and let me know how long you went and what your experience was like. I would love to hear about it. Okay, so now for the cons of my 72-hour fast. I'm not gonna lie here, there were definitely some cons. First, there's the general fatigue that I experienced. Starting about halfway through day 2, I started to feel a bit more sluggish. My vision actually felt slightly delayed as well, and it sometimes felt like I was actually visually missing things entirely. So if there was something that I was looking for that was pretty much right in front of my face, I would basically miss it, and then about 3-4 seconds later do a full 360 turn. There it was, right in front of my face. Now, I'm not gonna lie here, this does happen to me occasionally, but I did notice that it was happening a little bit more frequently than normal during the 72-hour fast. Number 2 is I lost muscle mass, about 2.6 pounds to be exact. Now, this kind of sounds bad on the surface, but I think there's a couple of things that we can consider here. Well, the first one is that my body fat isn't super high, meaning that I'm not clinically overweight or I'm not clinically obese. And then secondly, with it being 3 weeks later, I actually gained about 2.5 pounds back, but my body fat percentage has actually decreased even more. So yes, I technically did lose muscle mass during the fast, but for me, after 3 weeks, I did gain it all back plus more. The third con was that it was difficult to make meals for people in my family. Now, this was really challenging because when you're cooking, you're essentially using all of your senses. And because I wasn't eating, I couldn't use my sense of taste. So I was able to hear the food sizzle and cook. I could see it. I could smell it. I was touching it too. And not being able to taste the food that you're making is very, very, very tough. And number 4 is it's pretty difficult to force yourself to not eat food. Now, most people are fortunate enough to have a surplus of food just laying around the house, in the fridge, in the kitchen, in the pantry, wherever. But it's really difficult to have all this access to food, but force yourself to not eat any of it. But the plus side of this whole experience was that it was only 3 days, and you can do 3 days, and it's actually not as bad as you think it is. And to be honest, I was probably only hungry for maybe 25% of my waking hours, but even though it was only 25% of my waking hours, it was still a little mentally difficult. So those are the pros and the cons, but would I recommend doing a fast? Are prolonged fasts worth it? Well, the answer to that is yes and no. Okay, so here are some of the reasons why I wouldn't recommend doing a prolonged fast. If you're very lean already, I wouldn't recommend it. And if you're already very lean, I think you're gonna have a hard time with this just because you're gonna have less body fat to use as energy. I also think it's possible that you might lose a little bit more muscle mass than someone who has a little bit more body fat. But that's kind of it though. I just wouldn't recommend people who are very, very, very lean to do prolonged fasts like that. And now for the reasons why I would recommend doing a prolonged fast. If you're the type of person who recognizes that we're still essentially hunter-gatherers living in this modern world and that fasting and not eating food for longer periods of time is part of our human biology, then yeah, absolutely, go for it. I would also recommend it if you had a lot of weight to lose and you wanted to see some effective changes, not just from a numbers standpoint, but more from a metabolic and physiologic standpoint as well. Also, if you're the type of person who often experiences digestive issues, then I would totally recommend this because this is an opportunity for you to really allow your digestive system to relax, recover, and restore itself. And then lastly, if you're interested in improving your insulin sensitivity, then 100% jump on board. Now, if this is something that you're serious about and you're heavily considering, I would suggest starting out with an intermittent fasting program and then even doing occasional 24-hour fasts as well. Now, if you like this video and you want to learn more about effective weight loss strategies and becoming healthier, subscribe to this channel. And then also watch this video right here if you're interested in learning about how insulin resistance and weight gain go hand in hand. Okay, thanks so much for checking out this video, and I'll see you soon.